Because if every single person listening to this episode today thinks about themselves, if you think about you becoming a better mother, a better human being, everybody around you is going to be better.
Yeah.
Why don't we make 2022 the year of the individual?
Welcome to Diversity Dish, where we're dishing on everything diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice related. My name is Sedruola Maruska, and we're bridging the gap between what needs to be said and what needs to be heard. Those individual experiences that are often ignored or simply dismissed. Sometimes I'm dining alone, sometimes I'm dining with friends, and sometimes I'm dining a la carte. No matter how I'm dining, it promises to be delicious. Let's dig in.
Tahmina Watson is the founder of Watson Immigration Law and is a lawyer, author, and activist. She is the author of Legal Heroes in the Trump Era, as well as the Startup Visa book, which just released its second edition. She is a contributor to Above the Law and Entrepreneur magazine, as well as has been featured in many other outlets such as CNN, GeekWire, Puget Sound Business Journal, Scary Mommy, and more. Tahmina was featured as the Puget Sound Business Journal's 2020 Woman of the Year and as one of Business Insider's top startup immigration lawyers of 2021. Okay, today my guest is Tahmina Watson. Hi, Tahmina. How are you? It is such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sedruola. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you and learn from you.
Oh my goodness, I think we're going to learn a lot from you as well. I think that the work that you do in terms of immigration is so vital and so important to the conversation that I cannot wait to get into all of that. But before we do that, we want to learn a little bit about you. So I ask all my guests, what is it that you are most passionate about right now?
Right now, I'm so glad you asked this question because it's going to be an unexpected answer.
Okay.
I'm most passionate about birds. I've become
I love it.
I've become a birder in COVID. And it started with just watching the birds on my deck to now going far away to different parks and watching birds and taking pictures. So now in 2022, I'm embracing myself as a bird and nature photographer. And it's something that is at the forefront of my mind. And I'm so passionate. And I just had an article come out yesterday. I'll send that to you about how birding made me a fantastic lawyer. I mean, I was already good, but it just made me better.
I love it. I love so many things about what you just said. First of all, I love that it is so off, like you said, so unexpected that you said that you're passionate about birds, because I totally get it. Like, I've watched birds, we started watching them a lot because when we were home in 2020, because we put out bird feeder and all these birds would come and they have all these different personalities and sounds and all of that. But what I also love is that you said that you were good, but that you got even better. And I love that you own your power. That is so, so awesome and so important. So I know that you wrote an article, but tell us a little bit about how those birds made you better. This is so exciting to me.
Yeah, I think stepping back a little bit so people know who I am, I'm an immigration attorney. And if you tune into my accent, I'm an immigrant too. I moved from the United Kingdom in 2005, and I started practicing immigration law in the United States in 2006. And if you think about immigration law and the trajectory of it since that time, it's not been an easy journey for anybody, whether you're an immigrant, if you're a business owner, if you're a US citizen sponsoring somebody, everybody has been affected in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And I have been an advocate. My advocacy just grew and grew and grew because I couldn't really help anyone to to the extent they need. We can get to the finish line somehow for some
Mhm.
people, but not for everybody. And for those who can get to the finish line, there are just so many twists and turns. There's no such thing as simple.
Mhm.
And yes, it keeps me busy, it keeps me challenged, but I really want our clients to be able to get from point A to point B as easily as possible. And that's not something that is easy in this country. But it's not just immigration. In the last 5 years, we've had a tumultuous time here, whether
Mhm.
it's civil rights and education, healthcare, and all of that
Mhm.
really just got exacerbated during COVID.
Mhm.
The inequities, which I'm sure about,
Mhm.
have been exposed. All the division has been exacerbated. So as an immigration lawyer who is so close to the community, it's been a challenge. And during that time, particularly in the last 5 years, I had to figure out, how do I take care of myself so I can be better at taking care of everybody else? Because
Mhm.
when you are an empathetic, sympathetic person, you cannot help but take on the burden and the stress of somebody else into your own lives. And if you do that over and over again, the compound effect is that you become less effective, and that stress paralyzes you and cripples you.
Mhm.
So over time, I started a meditation practice so I could really protect my mind, so I can continue to be good at what I'm doing. But when COVID struck, everything went upside down.
Mm. No
From
kidding.
an immigration perspective, people who were in the US couldn't leave, even if they wanted to leave. People who were outside the US who needed to come back, they couldn't come back. It's almost like a monopoly board of the world, sort of, had its walls just go whoosh, up, and everybody
Yeah.
was stuck where they were. From an
Mhm.
immigration perspective, that brought unprecedented legal challenges.
Wow, I can't even begin to imagine that. And I didn't even, I mean, you think about it surfacely when it's not affecting you. But as you say that, I do, I'm thinking about it more deeply. I can see how that would be such a challenge.
So challenging. I mean, just one, I'll give you two examples, one of a person inside the country, one person outside the country.
Mm-hmm.
One person inside the country who had finished their program or whatever work they had, and they needed to leave by a certain date. If
Mm-hmm.
you do not leave by that certain date, you are now illegal. You are out of status. Your
Mm-hmm.
return into the US becomes jeopardized.
That's
They
right.
want to leave the country. They want to go back to Europe or wherever that place was. They found an air flight from point A to point B. However, there were interim stops, and those interim stops in those countries would not allow this person to enter. Therefore, the person could not get on that flight to go from point A to point B
Wow.
because the stopover was problematic. That
Right.
became a common issue. And the
Mm-hmm.
question was, how long does this person stay? How long does this person, give it to just be able to get on a flight? And
Mm-hmm.
what do we do for immigration purposes? So that's the kind of challenge we saw here. For some people, we did take immigration steps, but those became very delayed. And that's a story for another time. But that's a snippet of
Mm-hmm.
how that challenge began. Now, let's talk about the person who's already been in the US. Their immigration paperwork was in process. They went outside the country for whatever reason. Suddenly, that image of the walls going up meant the person couldn't come back. And
Mm-hmm.
what that meant was this person's immigration status in the US was denied, could not come back, cannot come back now. And 2 years on, the person is still outside. Now, these families have been torn apart. These are US citizen families who are now living in different places. And COVID, in the meantime, has essentially taken lives from some of my clients' family members who are waiting for visas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was happening, and I will just take, like, if people needed a timeline, I'd say end of February, March 2020 to, let's say, June, July, August 2020, that period. It was tumultuous for every single one of us. whether you're figuring out how to do Zoom schooling, how to actually, work from home. Do you have the technology, the mechanisms, the internet bandwidth, even be able to do Zoom schooling or work videos? All of that was happening while all these legal challenges were happening. And so how do you escape that for your own mental health? And that's how birds appeared in my life.
I love it.
I didn't even know a year later, 2 years later, I'd be talking about it. I was really just like, oh, these birds were always here. Oh, those wings are red and they expand this way and that way. And the beak is big and long and, pointed or like a hook. Oh, that's interesting. And so you're right. They have different personalities. One will caw away and shoo the small birds away,
Yeah.
And then the small birds will just go, ooh, I'm going to go peck that one and then leave. and it's sort of like I have 3 children's books in my head already. I just don't have enough time to write them. But that's how the birding came along. But what it did for me is it brought me moments of joy that helped me withstand these unprecedented issues that I was dealing with, that you were dealing with, your clients, your friends, everyone is dealing with. People didn't know how to deal with it. And inadvertently, by accident, I discovered birds. And what's ironic is my husband had been feeding birds for 3 years. He had always worked from home. So he was feeding birds, but I would leave the house when it's dark. I would come back when it's dark. Who's got time to look outside? I had to choose between feeding the kids or bathing them. Which one do we do today? And so suddenly I'm like, oh, the birds were always here. And so that joy was abundant. The word abundant is now in my vocabulary. That didn't exist before. And it's made me a calmer human being. I've become a more appreciative human being. I can now think about climate change in a more tangible way. Just like you said about immigration, you think of it as this on the surface. Climate change, yes, we all feel it, but you're not advocating for that. We can only do so much. But the birds have taken it to a different level, where when there was that oil spill, I forget where that was, maybe California.
Yeah.
I felt so sad for the birds and their wings and the ones that died.
Yeah.
These emotions that I didn't know existed have arisen out of me. But what the effect is that I was always a loving human being. I would cry for my clients. My client who says my child is sick and I need to keep this job because it gives me the insurance I need for my child. I would have cried for them. I still cry for them. But what I'm better able to do is actually guide them better, think about what they might need better, while also not necessarily taking the work home in the way I used to. So that compound effect of positivity is transformational. And 2022 for me is a year where I really want to spread the message of love. Because if every single person listening to this episode today thinks about themselves, if you think about you becoming a better mother, a better human being, everybody around you is going to be better. Yeah. Why don't we make 2022 the year of the individual, so that if you are a better individual, everything around you will have that ripple effect. And no matter what your profession is, whether it's an educator, a healthcare provider, an immigration lawyer, a politician, no matter where you are, that ripple effect will be felt.
Yeah. Well, my goodness, we have so much to unpack here.
And it all started with birds.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And absolutely, I'm so with you on the individuals, each of us individually becoming more loving and better humans in order to create the changes that we want to see. It's one of the things that I talk about also in my work when I'm talking to individuals, when I'm coaching individuals and I'm saying to them, okay, you have the things that you believe, you have the things that you want to see in the world. But what we tend to do as humans is we tend to compartmentalize that. At home, we're going to have all these visions and all these things that we want to do and we want to see. And then we're going to go to work and we're going to see things that buck up against what we believe and what we want to see and how we would like our environment at work to be, but we won't say anything because we think, oh, well, work needs to do, it's a different place. No, we're the same individuals wherever we go. And once we can tap into being that individual, that person, wherever we are, that's where we're going to affect change. Organizations, businesses, industries are all made up of individual people. And we look at these industries and these organizations and we say, well, that industry is doing this and they shouldn't be doing that, or that organization is doing this, when in reality, it's the people within that industry or that organization that are doing this. And if you are part of that industry, it's like when the media says, well, the media is doing blah, blah, blah. And you're like, you are the media. And you're not doing anything differently. So why is it that you would separate yourself in that way? We can't really separate ourselves in that way. We have to be the change, you know, as Mahatma Gandhi says, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And that doesn't mean only in certain places. It means all the time we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. I can empathize, but I cannot begin to grasp the pressure or the pain that comes with the scenarios that you just shared with us. You know, when people they're doing everything that they're supposed to do, that they need to do, they're working to do it the way that they've been told is the way that they need to do it, and then these roadblocks come in and there's no real recourse put in for you know, those scenarios. And so here you're looking at a situation that you feel that you have no power to do anything about. And I just can't even begin to imagine how that works.
Hey, thanks for listening. My name is Sedruola Maruska, and I help entrepreneurs and small businesses go from mediocre to magnificent by transforming their cultures to be more equitable and inclusive. To find out how we can work together, go to diversitydish.com, where you'll find my consulting, coaching, and speaker information. diversitydish.com. I look forward to working with you.
It's difficult. It's difficult. And what I will say is, first, I would love for people to read the article that I will send you, because
I would love to put the link in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, people often use industry or work as a vehicle to do something they don't necessarily want to do, or they think it's not me, it's okay to do that.
Right.
You know, but it's so important. I think again, I come back to birds, because birds have helped me go out to parks, walk in silence, watch nature. I mean, one of the things I love doing is catching photographs of birds in flight, and you know, flying with something in their mouth or catching a fish or something. Nature is so beautiful. Nature is a loving place. You know, yes, you know, there's an ecosystem, one has to eat the other.
Absolutely.
Us humans do not have to do that.
No.
But we can learn from nature about love. And if each of us, let's just talk about immigration for just a moment in this context.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are doing what they're supposed to do. A lot of people need help in fixing the things that they had no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, there are 11 million undocumented people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
They're contributing to the economy.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot collect Social Security from it, but they are contributing.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, COVID was an example that exposed the lack of workers, the lack of so many things. But the one place we were allowed to go to was the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And while 2 years later, we're dealing with supply chain issues,
Mm-hmm.
in those very few months, we were still getting those shiny apples in the grocery store. Who was picking that apple for you to have in your kitchen? A lot of these people are immigrants. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at the milk industry, a very large portion of them are immigrants. The agricultural industry, the healthcare industry, the technology industry. If you think about each of these components in their silos, they're being held up by immigrants to this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so where would we have been without the immigrants holding up
Mm-hmm.
our communication, our businesses, our education, and everything? So
Mm-hmm.
when you think about that, we need to make things better for everybody.
Yes.
And one of the things that people forget is, oh, I don't want to help the immigrant, or I don't want to help this situation because it's going to affect me. That's not the kind of individualism I'm talking about. I'm talking
No.
about individualism where you love yourself, therefore you will love others.
Right.
Without ego, love yourself without ego, because the selfishness of you is what is holding us back.
Yeah.
And there's a collective emotion that is that way, but we need to create a collective emotion going the other way, in the way of love. And so what you deal with all the time, where you said you're talking to individuals, it's hard for people to understand. It took me 2 years for the penny to drop. When where you're listening to the speech of, or reading the speech that Martin Luther King gave, like only love can overcome hate. All of these things that you listen to all the time, you listen to it all the time, therefore you don't listen to it anymore.
Yes, you don't hear it. You don't actually hear it. And it's true. When people say, I'm not going to do this because they think that it's going to affect them personally adversely. For example, they don't want everyone to have healthcare because, lazy people, I'm going to be paying for lazy people to have health insurance. There's so many things that people use that argument to say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work with immigrants or immigration because it's going to affect me adversely.
Mm-hmm.
When the reality is, not doing it affects you adversely.
Yes.
Not
exactly.
allowing people to have health insurance means that that they cost us more in taxes because they still have to be cared for in some way, shape, or form. So if they go to an emergency room, someone is still paying for that. It comes down to, you're still paying for it. It's just whether or not you're doing it willingly, or you're doing it or it's being taken in a way that you don't see.
That's right.
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And I say this all the time, but I'm going to continue to say it until I start hearing a lot more people saying it to me. And that is that there is not one thing in our society that is not affected by racism and discrimination. And until we can dismantle that system, that white supremacist system, that white supremacist thinking, everyone is being adversely affected by it. Some definitely more than others, but everyone is being adversely affected by it.
I agree.
There's no one benefiting.
And what I will add to that are two things. The first thing I will add is there's discrimination and racism even within minority communities, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And when I come back to the notion of love and individual love for themselves, it would really help every single person. And no matter what your viewpoint, whether you're in a minority group having discriminatory thoughts or you're not, the love is the basic human foundation of everything. The second thing I will add is a common misconception, the one that people hear the most, is that they, whether it's immigrants or other minorities, they are taking our jobs away.
Right.
And in this moment in time, in history, in the history of America, it has been exposed to be a lie.
Of
Right
course.
this moment, it was always not true,
Right.
but now it is evidently not true. If you look at every small business, and I have this conversation practically every week, multiple times a week, businesses saying, well, I can't find a worker for this, and I can't find a worker for that. Whether you are a construction company, or if you're a technology company, or you're an architectural company, every industry is lacking people.
Yep.
But the hospitality industry, particularly the ones where you need manual labor, for example, whether it's a senior care home, or it is a resort where they need janitorial help, or you name it, those workers are not there. And so when this concept of they are taking our jobs away is raised, this moment in time is the evidence that is not true. And then who is harmed? It's the consumer that is harmed. It's the American consumer.
We're all harmed.
And so immigration really should be looked upon as an economic strategy to revive what we have gone through. And that is where I come back to love, because we can't bring change. We've been talking about immigration reform for 30 plus years. We have talked about immigration reform in the last, 8 weeks. We were so close, yet so far. And, even what is happening in Congress at the moment with the Build Back Better bill, it's in jeopardy. We don't know if it will happen or not, but it is and should be looked upon as an economic strategy for the better of every single individual in this country.
Right. Well, this country was built on immigration. So it is a foundational precept of this country.
Can you say that one more time?
The country doesn't work without immigration. The idea that there are people who are supposed to be here and other people who are not supposed to be here is absolutely ridiculous when you are looking at the history and this country, right?
Examples. Nordstrom. He was a European immigrant to the United States. Levi's, the person who created the Levi's jeans, was a European immigrant to the United States. Walt Disney was a second generation immigrant to the United States. All these names that have put America on the map, they're immigrants. People just need to learn a little bit more, or understand, or appreciate their own background. One of the things that has also caused some sort of interest in myself is ancestral history. If you are able to track your own ancestors, you can learn that they came from somewhere else. Where did they come from? If you are not Native American Indian, you have come from somewhere. You
came from somewhere else.
Yes.
Just,
Exactly. So I will ask people to read my book. It's a short one. The two things I want to mention. You mentioned Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. It's a mantra that is so close to my heart. I treat it as a mantra, because often, when you see crisis, you think somebody else is going to do something about it.
Right.
But then you're like, why isn't somebody doing something about it? You have to step up.
I'm somebody.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I wrote a book in October 2020 called Legal Heroes. And I start it with be the change you want to see. And I would love for people to see that.
I'll definitely put the link in the show notes.
Thank you. And the second thing I want to mention is I wrote a book called The Startup Visa. And the first edition was in 2015. And I mentioned I moved to this country in 2005. I've been still learning. I was still learning. And I had to learn about history to be able to even write this book. So the first chapter is dedicated to some historic facts of immigration. And, you know, if you want a snapshot of immigration, I would encourage people to read the first chapter at a very minimum. So you just have an understanding for yourself, because I looked at it from an immigration perspective. And
Mhm.
there's the summary will be helpful for people to understand. If you continue to read the book, that will be amazing. But
Mhm.
history is, I think, very important for us to appreciate,
Mhm.
because that's where we learn to take ourselves to the future.
Yes. And I think, something that you said is that we need to learn a little bit about immigration. And definitely we need to learn about the history of this country. And that is a conversation for another day. But learning about the smallest thing, if there's something that you feel that you have some type of opinion about, learn a little bit about it, learn a little bit more about it, because you might find that you change your opinion about it, or you might find that, wow, the information that I gotten was kind of skewed or was kind of wrong, and this means, or this shows me that this is, something different. It's so important to do that, because I find that, there are ideas and words that people throw around. They throw them around freely as if they understand everything about them, and they don't understand even the basics about them. And so, and you can always tell because they throw them around and you go, wait a minute, that doesn't make that doesn't sound right. That doesn't make sense, right? So we really need to educate ourselves on these things. I will definitely put your links in the show notes, because I do want people to go ahead and look at and pick up the books that you've written so that they can find out a little bit more. And I
Thank you.
love how you have correlated the slowing down is really what you've talked about, the slowing down and the watching how nature unfolds, to get a sense of grounding and a sense of who you are and where you are and where you fit into this whole scheme of things. Like you said, we can't do everything. There's so many things that we can touch upon, but we can't all do everything. But there are things that we can do in our everyday lives that reflect those things that are important to us. And one of the most important is definitely self-care and loving ourselves enough to care for ourselves so that we are full and able to care for others. So that when others come along, and this fits into the space of when others come along, we don't have to feel insecure about what it is that they bring or who they are, because we're already secure and we love ourselves. And that's when you say, having that individual love and self-love, that's what I hear. I don't need to be concerned about the next person coming along, as even if they're totally different from me. I don't need to be weary, concerned, fearful, anxious about them, because I'm good with me. I can be now more curious, and I can be more now loving, more open to who they are and to what they can bring to my life and what I can bring to their life, right? Instead of
Absolutely.
being fearful and going, I don't want to know, because I feel a lot of it is pushback. It's like, I don't want to, I'm afraid. And people won't tell you that they're afraid. They'll use all kinds of other words instead of saying, I'm just afraid of difference. I'm afraid of change. It makes me anxious. But if we were able to connect with that and to be able to verbalize or to say that, even to articulate it to ourselves, this makes me a little nervous, but you know what? I'm going to be open to the possibilities here, because I love myself enough, and I want to love humanity enough to be okay with whatever's coming forth. So I absolutely love where you're coming from, and I do love that correlated the two. Bird watching is the newest thing I've heard on on this podcast.
I'm surprised at myself too, I have to say. Initially I was like, oh, I'm going to sound crazy talking about birds. I'm like, no, that's me. I've got to start talking about it because I can't think of anything else. It's dominating my thoughts, but it's dominating it in a good way, because I'm like, it's really, I am truly, my working hours are no less. I fit in birding while the kids are sleeping, before my meetings, in the weekends. And I never knew that I had spare time. It's what's interesting
let me tell you how this works. And that is a very female thing. Women do not realize how much time that they spend, they just don't realize how much spare time they possibly can have, because we're so busy always filling our time with so many different things, so many different people, so many different activities, so many different hats that we have to wear. Okay, this hat on now. What does that mean? This hat, what does that mean? And it's
true. And I have to say that it's not that I do have spare time, but I'm making the time for myself. It's that's
important.
I mean, you could fill it with cleaning the kitchen and doing the laundry and what have you, and you could fill it up with work as much as you want. But one of the things that I write in this article is that often we want to be better at what we do, and we keep thinking working more is going to make me better, and that's not untrue. The more you have experience in something, you'll be better. But it's also true that if you can have a little time for yourself, that you will come back afresh to the thing that you want to focus on, and you will be better. And so I am astonished at how much time I can dedicate to birding and photography, and because I never had that time before. But that time is well used and is precious. It's on the calendar. Nobody can take that from me. And it really is helping everybody around me. And so that's what I would say to people. And for lawyers, particularly, it's just so important, because we are driven by the time that we put into the work. For different law firms have different models, but often it's the billable time, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that and you've got to meet the deadline. But when you're in that cycle, you can become less effective. And so if you can take yourself out for that 10 minutes on the deck, you'll come back and be more productive. And that's what I've learned. That's been my education.
Well, that's a huge education, because I think people don't often realize that 10 minutes, 5 minutes, just clearing your head, changing your perspective for just a few minutes can make a world of difference in your day. So it's a huge perspective to share, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with us? Is there anything that we haven't touched upon right now as it relates to, immigration or even self-care? Because we've kind of gone into the self-care realm here, but
I'll talk about immigration for a second, because that's still my day job, and making sure that I can help people effectively. I help people with business immigrations. If you have a business, I help them with their visas for that, green cards. I help people with family immigration, parent, children, spouses, that sort of thing. I help people with citizenship applications. I write about all of these things and the changes that are happening on a weekly basis on a blog at our website, watsonimmigrationlaw.com/blog. If people are interested, they can sign up. But I host a podcast called Tahmina Talks Immigration. I've had it for 6 years, and I talk about all the issues of immigration that is happening at the time. But actually, as of this year, I'm launching a second podcast called The Startup Visa, which is so exciting because it's a spin-off from my second book that I mentioned.
Nice.
And it's going to be talking about all the issues that affect businesses from an immigration perspective. And I'd love for you to be on the show to talk about the work you do, because
thank you.
Companies that I work with are starting off the ground. They need to set policies.
Yes.
And what you have to share and offer would be absolutely very useful to them.
Well, thank you. I would absolutely love to do that.
That'd be
Yeah.
amazing. I can't wait to speak again. And so
Yeah.
I think, as a professional, I love what I do. And I love it even more with each day that goes by, which is
Mhm.
a really great thing to be able to say.
Absolutely.
But it's a combination of all the things that I am that helps me be the best professional that I can be, want to be, and need to
Mhm.
be for others.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And I really appreciate what you do. Immigration law is definitely an area that I think could really use people, people with heart and people with love, because as the child of immigrants who also, of course, had, aunts and uncles and everyone, my whole family is immigrants, right? And hearing their stories and knowing how even when you do it right, it can be trying and it's a hard road to go, especially when you're coming from a country where the language is different, the cultures are different, and you come here and there's so much to navigate. And so I think that it's so important to have someone in your corner who can really empathize and be there to kind of help you navigate all the paperwork and all the red tape that goes into becoming a citizen in this country. Because I know from the time my parents got here, it has gotten much more difficult because of thinking, because of information that's being put out there and the way that people think of immigrants. But most immigrants are just people who are trying to do the best they can for themselves and for their families wherever they go. If they can't find it in one place, they're going to try to find it somewhere else. That's all immigrants are. And I think that when people vilify immigrants or vilify immigration or vilify the need that people have, vilify people who, even those who come and seeking asylum, they vilify those people. They really dehumanize their truly human experience of needing to be okay. We have basic needs, and those are the basic needs that they're looking for so that they can then grow from there. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your advocacy as well as you do what you do. And I just want people to understand immigration is such a large, there's so many aspects to immigration. So if you're going to want to talk about immigration, if you want to vilify immigration, please understand what you're talking about and who you are vilifying, because these are all humans. And so like Tahmina said, we need to have that self-love first, for sure, so that we can be open to all the others and all the other love that we can be available for. So, Tahmina, before we sign off, I have to ask you, of course, my signature question that I ask all of my guests, because we are on Diversity Dish. So we would all love to know, what is your favorite dish?
Can I name more than one?
You can.
It's interesting because I'm not necessarily a foodie, but I do love a few things. So number one, I love sushi. When I go out, that's what I would like to have.
Yeah.
When I am at home, I make my own soups. It's just a whole bunch of vegetables and saute, and either I'll put stock or I'll put lentils. I love it. My kids love it. But right this moment, my mom is visiting. And my mom is cooking a lot of Bangladeshi dishes. And even though I'm like, oh my God, mom, rice again, it's going to add to my waistline, I can't resist. It's so delicious. And so it's really, really wonderful that my mom is cooking us really wonderful food. And my husband's like, I'm just eating like a king. It's not sweet.
He's gonna miss your mom when she leaves.
Seriously.
Tahmina, where's the beautiful Bangladeshi food?
Exactly, not from me.
I love it. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here on Diversity Dish with me. It has been such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me. Thank you so much for having me.
I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
Me too. Thank you.
Hey, did you enjoy that episode? If so, please leave a review. It would mean the world, but only if it's a good one and you really did enjoy it. In which case, it would be awesome if you help support my work over at patreon.com/Sedruola Maruska. And finally, before you go, don't forget diversitydish.com. I'd love to work with you. See you soon.